The scroll saw opens up an unlimited number of woodworking possibilities, such as making wooden toys, puzzles, and home decor items. In this video, I'm going to pass along 7 scroll saw blade tips that you can use to improve your skills on this versatile tool. Unless you're making a very limited number of items, you're going to need an assortment of blades. I covered blade types in another video. I'll leave a link. But over time, you're likely to amass a number of blades. I keep some in their original retail blister packs on a pegboard, organized by type and size. Over time, I developed a preference for the Pegasus Modified Geometry blade as my go-to blade. I purchase them several dozen at a time in each size and keep them in plastic test tubes, which are in turn stored in a holder made from a piece of scrap 6/4 oak. These parts will be cut from 3/4 inch thick poplar, and I use my rules of thumb derived from hundreds of hours of experience on the scroll saw to determine which blade to use. I came up with an acronym as a reminder to the steps used in making the decision: THICK, THICK. The T stands for thickness, and in my experience, a number 7 or number 9 blade works best for 3/4 inch material. The H is for hardness. Poplar is a relatively soft wood, so a number 7 would be sufficient. The letter I prompts me to ask if there are inside cuts. If so, the size and shape of inside cuts may dictate the pilot hole and blade size. There are no inside cuts on this project, one of the reasons it's called an easy nativity. See if for complexity, are there any complex lines to follow? If so, you may need to choose a smaller blade size. There are no complex lines to follow in this project. Taking all this into consideration, I can use a number 9 blade for every part of this project. The K, by the way, means knowing where to start cutting. That will be an easy decision for all of these parts. For reverse tooth blades, there are more teeth pointing in the downward direction than upward. Maybe Superman could tell by looking at the blade, but I need something more than that to determine which side to mount in the upper blade holder. You want the blade to do the cutting on the downstroke, so you want to mount the blade accordingly. The teeth cutting on the upstroke are there to give a smoother finish. My method of determining how to mount the blades is tactile, by touch. I pick up the blade in my right hand and gently run the teeth across my thumb. There wasn't much resistance that way, so I flipped the blade over and tried the process again. This time the blade wanted to grab my flesh, so I knew this was the direction I wanted, pointing towards the table. Don't do this too hard. You could probably get a slight cut if you did. Now, lightly fasten the top of the blade, feed it through the table, fasten it tightly in the bottom blade chuck, then go back and fully tighten the top and add tension to the blade. Okay, that's looking through the magnifier. The way I see it is I'm normally cutting, and you can see where I drilled the pilot hole, and there's it's the inside of a letter B, so there's a couple sharp points there at the top, and then a curve in the straight line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to that sharp point, back off a little bit with the blade. Now I can make my turn this way. Follow that around. Get to this corner here, cut right to the corner, back up very, very slightly with the blade so it's not cutting, make the turn, and then go around the rest of the way here. Now that was not a perfect cut because I'm cutting from a really odd angle, so I can get this on camera. Here's another example of making inside cuts. Each of the stars has 5 sharp points. I drilled a pilot hole in the center, but rather than trying to make all those tiny angles, I cut alongside one edge to a point, stopped, then backed up the blade to the pilot hole. From there, I made a cut along the next straight edge until the blade reached the point where I'd stopped the first cut. You can remove the small piece of scrap, then continue cutting one side at a time until the entire star is complete. When you get to a sharp corner like that, get to the corner, back off just slightly so the blade isn't cutting. Turn it in the direction you want it to go next, and then start pushing to make the top. This is a brand new blade, so it's cut with very little effort, which is doing. So the door is not an inside cut because the bottom is on the outside. Cut down one side until you get to the 90-degree corner, then stop, back up the blade ever so slightly so that it's no longer cutting. Then turn the workpiece 90 degrees and start feeding the blade into the next line. It takes a little bit of practice, but this is a useful skill to develop because many patterns require 90-degree turns. When you're new at this, don't worry if the corners aren't perfectly square. You can go back and touch them up on the scroll saw after you've cut the door and remove the waste piece. You can also use a file or chisel to square off the corner. And on some pieces, a corner that's not perfect will not even be noticed. There are some sharp angles on the outside of the stable, so I'll show you a couple of ways to approach these. Just like you did for the 90-degree corners for the door, cut to an intersection, back off almost microscopically, pivot the workpiece, then start cutting in the new direction. Now I'll show a different way to make these cuts. I'll cut all the way to the edge of the material on the left side of the star. I'll toss the piece of scrub material, and rather than having to make an extremely sharp turn here at the top of the star, I can now start a new cut from the outside of the wood. For the next side of the star, I'm going to go past the outside point, and rather than having to make a sharp angle turn, I'll guide the blade into the waist area, make a gentle curve turn, and come back to cut the next side of the star from the outside rather than the inside. The rest of the outside cut on the stable is mostly a matter of swiveling the workpiece back and forth to cut the curves. So the tip you learned here is that you can always use the waste material area to maneuver the blade into position to make sharp intersections. I go through a lot of scroll saw blades because I use my scroll saw for almost every project. Once a blade starts to get dull, you should replace it before it possibly starts to burn the wood and before the blade actually breaks. However, I've discovered a way to get a little bit of extra use from blades. In the example I'm showing here, I had cut a lot of pieces from half-inch red oak, some of which was fairly dense, and the number 7 Pegasus modified geometry blade was getting dull. I could tell because the blade was slowing down, and it took a little more pressure to complete the cut, but I thought the blade might have a little more life left in it. I still had a large quantity of quarter-inch pieces to cut, so rather than toss the blade, I used it to cut the quarter-inch stock. Once the blade started to slow down again, I tossed it. It doesn't always work, but it's worth a try. In the previous tip, I had some 1/2 and quarter-inch material that needed to be cut, so I just switched from the half to the quarter-inch material when the blade started to get dull. But what if you need to switch to a different size blade and the one you're using isn't ready to be discarded yet? I took a piece of scrap 6/4 oak and used a Forstner bit to drill some half-inch holes for some magnets I had on hand. I used a felt tip marker to write the blade size number next to each magnet. I used mostly number 3, 5, 7, 9, and 12. The magnet holds each blade in place until I need it again. This prevents me from placing used blades back in the container with new ones, and it keeps them handy. I think I'm going to improve on this a little bit by adding a second magnet and gluing the magnets into the holes with super glue.